ever wonder how little bits of games come into fruition? Like, just picking a random thing here, this random enemy in Kirby. What is this weird, rotating, bobbing up and down thing? Like, what is it? My eyes cannot comprehend what this thing is. I've never really understood it. Well, actually, there's a bit of a story with this guy. See, it's actually a callback to an earlier HAL game. I believe the Japanese name for it was Junkie Tank, although the English version called it Tracks. The idea was it was a top-down, scrolling shooter where you play a tank that has to shoot omnidirectionally, but because you were a titular junkie tank, you could only rotate your turret in one direction. Which means if enemies showed up on the opposite side of your tank rotation, you kinda had to put up with that, and it was kind of obnoxious. And it definitely wasn't a limitation of being on the Game Boy and having one button dedicated to that or anything, I'm sure. Well, Guardian Force is basically a much higher production value sequel on the Saturn, made by a completely different company that gives you full control of your turret rotation. Done and done. Please join me next time where we'll either talk about this pig that looks like it's wearing a Star Trek visor, or this thing that is very clearly Twinbee and had to get changed in the DS version. You know, sad thing is that's my favorite enemy in the game. Oh, I guess you probably want more than that, huh? Now the story to Guardian Force is war. Just war. Ron Perlman once told me,
"War never changes."
But David Hayter would later go on to tell me,
"War has changed."
So I'm not sure who to believe. Maybe that's the story, figuring out if war has in fact changed or not. There's not a lot of story to this game. It is a fairly straightforward shooter that's focusing on the gameplay more than anything, but it is war. You are some slightly less junkie tank, fighting for the memory of your brother, the more junkie tank, who went through a war in the past in a game made by a completely different developer, but is totally part of the canon. Not to be confused with the canon you'll be rotating around to shoot everything around you, because this is a really cool omnidirectional shooter. Weirdly enough, the first stage of this game is labeled as a training area, but like, it doesn't give you the opportunity to train because there's still very much the threat of death here that you can be punished for, and I don't understand that. That's not training at that point, that's just level 1. Why they labeled it training stage, I'm not really sure. I feel like there's a bit of a mixed message in starting this as a training area, you know? It's also worth noting that you're incapable of adding extra credits. When you start the game, you're given 10 credits, and that's it. And to be fair, each credit is several lives, so that should be a lot, but still, first time through you might not be able to beat it because this game is really challenging, and unfortunately you can't just credit spam your way to victory. Not this time. But they give you plenty, so they at least let you feel your way through the game, for a while anyway. The gameplay to Guardian Force is a very tense, scrolling shoot 'em up. However, it has some pretty interesting mechanics because it's not just vertical or horizontal. It's omnidirectional. The game will scroll in whatever direction it kind of wants to at whatever point, and you kind of have to be able to handle threats from all sides. That leads to the key mechanic of this game, which is that not only do you have a standard shot, which shoots whichever way the tank is facing, which is to say whichever way the screen is scrolling, you're always shooting in that general vague direction, but you can actually rotate the main cannon on your tank. Unlike Junkie Tank, you can actually rotate it both clockwise and counterclockwise with a separate button each. And the nice thing about this game is you can actually modify your control scheme. I didn't initially realize this, but while I was playing, I noticed that there was like a bomb feature I just couldn't activate, and it's because they actually mapped the bombs initially to pushing 2 buttons at once, and that was just a little unclear to me. So going in and swapping all the controls, yeah, you can change which buttons rotate which direction, as well as which button or button combination activates bombs. This is nice, because it means that if you're like me and the initial control scheme isn't necessarily to your taste or it's a little convoluted, you can make it far more simple and whatever works your way. I really do appreciate that this game does feature the ability to swap controls. Very, very nice touch. Very simple quality of life thing. Makes the game infinitely more playable. And one thing I have to give this game credit for is how excellent it utilizes its mechanics and its environments. Because your attacks are omnidirectional, enemies can come from any direction to come and hit you. And likewise, because the screen is often shifting which direction it's scrolling, you constantly have to be moving. You can't necessarily stick to the tried and true stay as far back on the screen as possible to have as much breathing room, and instead the game will actively force you out of that habit. If you're the kind of person who likes making minute dodges around intense bullet patterns. There's a lot of that here, but the game will actively force you to start making big plays. Frequently, bosses will actively try and push you around so that you have to maneuver around them while rotating your gun in an opposite manner to keep a bead on them. This game is absolutely forcing you out of the tried and true methods that a lot of shmups force you into. And I really appreciate that it's utilizing its mechanics in such a way to sort of break that habit and force you to try and play it a little bit different. This game kind of plays on a whole different level because of it. But it seems like everything in this game is geared towards forcing complacent players to make bigger and bolder plays, and riskier ones at that. And I really respect that. As you travel through the game, you will shoot enemies and you will blow them up. When you destroy an enemy entirely, they will drop a medal, and this medal has a number on it. These are more or less your points, or rather the core of what makes scoring in this game so interesting and difficult. See, these are not just the source of points. I mean, they are that, but there's also a sort of built-in point multiplier involved. Basically, if you notice, the medals have a number on, and as you collect them, that number will go up. That number goes up if you collect them in order without losing one. If a medal disappears off the screen, you lose your multiplier. So you constantly have to be aware of where the medals are as well as where you are and bullets. It's not just simply avoid taking damage, shoot the thing. It's now avoid taking damage, shoot the thing, collect the medals, and don't let any of them off the screen. And I kind of appreciate this because it means that you have to frequently put your own safety on the back burner if you want to keep your point multiplier up there. And because this is an arcade game, that's kind of important. The game is actively forcing you to make risk-reward decisions based on how important score versus survival is. And when the point multiplier gets really high up there, you're more and more likely to make reckless decisions in order to keep it going. I really appreciate the logic behind this and how well it worked. You will eventually get power-ups dropped, and these power-ups come in kind of two flavors. The first ones are these little orbs that flash different colors. There's 5 in all, and each of these colors corresponds to a different weapon. Red is the standard initial fire shot. It's kind of a spread shot, and it's probably pound for pound the most boring weapon in the game, but it's also the most useful in all situations I found. Yellow is a strong laser, but it's a very narrow shot, so it's hard to hit a lot of enemies with it all at once, and it has a huge amount of delay between shots, so while you do a lot of damage with it, it's real scary to use, especially when you're under fire. Green is probably the most interesting weapon in the game and probably the most damaging by far, but also the hardest to use. You have a laser yo-yo that does a ton of damage in a single localized area, but aiming it's kind of hard because anything between those 2 points still doesn't take damage. This weapon requires a lot of mastery, and it's probably the most unique weapon in the game, but it's also the most difficult. The blue one is missiles, and the purple one I think are lobbed bombs. I get these two mixed up a lot because purple and blue on the power-ups look very similar to me, and they swap pretty quick. Every single one of these weapons has a different use, as well as a different play style and level of mastery required to really utilize it well. Like that yo-yo, yeah, that's going to be hard. And that laser, super useful, but under most circumstances, you're going to be under a lot of fire, so you can't use it all that effectively. It's really important to know where you are in the game and what kind of weapons would benefit the situation best, and this is where multiple playthroughs will definitely benefit. But that's not the end of power-ups, because next are these little crystal power-ups. These power up your weapons individually. Collect these crystals and you level up to level 10 because there's a lot of levels, and your weapon gets stronger and more powerful. Unfortunately, this is where the game stumbles a little bit because while there are 10 levels to each weapon, there's not really any difference between all that many of them. Pretty much until you hit level 10, I didn't really notice any differences between any of the weapons, and honestly, I was wondering if I was powering them up at all. The game, I think, would benefit from having like maybe 3 levels and just having more meaningful power-ups between each and every one, especially because getting from level 1 to level 10 is very, very time-consuming and arduous, and if you're not very good at this game, you're never going to get there unless you waste multiple credits for an instant full power-up on respawn, which is nice that they give you that, but that might be the only way certain people will ever even get to see these power-ups, and like I said, they're not all that impressive on a level-by-level basis, so it's kind of disappointing. You also have access to bombs, and the interesting thing about bombs is, while they are screen clearing in effect, more or less, they actually change visually based on what weapon weapons you have, and they react a little bit differently, which is really, really cool. I remember the fire one was like this laser energy skull that looked like something ripped straight out of Truxton. I remember just sitting there thinking, yeah, this game is metal and it's awesome. I love how this game feels. The scrolling is great. Enemies are very, very intense, and it's a difficult game. I think the only thing I dislike about it, okay, there's two things. First and foremost is that it feels like you run into the same bosses a couple of times. There's a few times I ran into what was effectively just a stationary enemy, and then later you'd run into like the same one, but it'd be moving and slightly modified. It does feel like this game slightly tweaks and reuses boss designs, although the mechanics are a little bit different. Their visual designs are not, and it's kind of a shame. The other big issue is that the final boss of the game, because there's actually two endings to the game, you only get to see that actually good ending if you beat the final boss of the game in under 30 seconds. I'm not a big fan of that, because it means that if you do beat the game, there's a very good chance you won't see the real ending to this game. In addition to scoring points through the medals, there's also timers for bosses. You defeat them within that certain period of time, and you get a big score bonus, obviously, and if you don't, they eventually just leave you alone. It's kind of a little bit weird that they just wander off, but I'm guessing the entire game was more or less built on a set sort of rail, so, you know, they can't have you extending certain periods or something. I don't really know why they decided to do this, but I do appreciate their solution, which was, you know, defeat the enemy this fast, you get a big bonus. Awesome. It just doesn't make a lot of sense that, you know, the big boss that's hounding you and making your life absolutely miserable just decides, bored now, and wanders off. Like, is our tank that's the last starfighter of tanks that's trying to destroy whatever nation you're trying to represent that's invading us just suddenly not interested in us anymore? Is the fact that we are not capable of defeating you within a time limit a sign that we are not actually a threat to your country, so therefore you don't have to attack us anymore? You have no faith in our ability to defeat you? I don't know. It's weird. I don't really get it in the context of how the actual game should work, but I think that mechanically their solution was pretty eloquent. The overall presentation to Guardian Force is pretty solid. I think that the sprites are very detailed and very, very nice. The enemy designs themselves are great. The tank designs are great. The individual weapons are fantastic. I like the stage layouts, and the use of color in certain places is kind of striking, and I really, really enjoy the level of detail on these sprites. Like, they are just very detailed, very beautiful. Really appreciate that. Audio-wise, the music itself sounds very, very good, although it does feel a little lower quality. I don't think they're using like CD quality audio or anything. So while the sound quality is not quite as good as maybe it could have been for the time, the music is really, really good. I do quite enjoy the soundtrack to this game, with lots of high energy jams. Yeah, it's a pretty good soundtrack. I especially like the music to Stage A, the first real stage of the game. Very nice music. I like it a lot. Overall, the presentation, I think audio-wise, it could be a little bit better for the time, but the music itself, really good. Visually, it's just awesome. Now, if you want a copy of Guardian Force on Sega Saturn, cheapest copy I see right now, disc only, is $235. Holy crap. And I have to give a huge shout out and thank you to JetWolf for setting me up with this. And you should go check out JetWolf's channel. I actually just watched this recently. He has this amazing 1 credit clear run of Radiant Silvergun. I've never actually seen Radiant Silvergun, and I was just floored at how pretty that game is. And the way he flew through that, very, very impressive. Go check that out. I don't think I've ever actually heard of Guardian Force before this, but it was a lot of fun. That's not the only way to play this, however. It was actually bundled in a collection along with 2 Cotton games, which were also made by the same developer, Success. And you can get that on Switch for as cheap as about $50, which is a lot better. Plus you get 2 Cotton games, and those games are pretty fun. I haven't spent a lot of time playing Cotton games. I've only actually played one of them, but I had a lot of fun with that game as well. You can also get both the collection and individual releases of all 3 games in that collection on Steam, with Guardian Force specifically being about $20. And this would probably be the easiest, most affordable way to get this game specifically. Guardian Force was a shoot 'em up that was kind of a surprise to me. You don't play a lot of shoot 'em ups that give you full omnidirectional control of where you're shooting. It's an interesting experience, and the game itself is pretty good. I won't say it's the best Saturn shmup of all time. It's not. I won't say it's the nicest looking Saturn shooter of all time. I mean, especially after watching that video of Radiant Silvergun, but it is a very, very solid shooter, and it's on a system that has a lot of those, to be fair, but I think this one is worth attention all the same.